So welcome everybody. We're really excited to have you here to help us launch the SETS Community of Practice e-learning. I'm Nick Ross and I work to facilitate the SETS Community of Practice. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we are joining from today, all of us around Australia. I myself am calling in from Wurundjeri lands of the Five Kulin Nation Alliance. I pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that same respect today to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here joining us for the launch event. So to get started, perhaps a talk about settlement sets and e-learning. A quick figure that there's 120 organisations, settlement service providers engaged with the Settlement Engagement and Transition Support Program across Australia, and over 1,000 SETS staff working in partnerships with migrants to enhance settlement outcomes. So these SETS staffs include frontline workers, project support staff, receptionists, SETS team leaders, managers, and organisational executives. There's people who've been working in settlement for decades. There's also new staff to settlement and to SETS who have come from other sectors or who are fresh graduates who have just recently started working for SETS providers. Settlement practitioners are expert in many ways with professionalism, compassion, understanding and care in the work that they do, and specialist knowledge at many different levels. The SETS e-learning courses are looking to build on this foundation of experience and expertise. The courses are specific to the settlement sector and the work SETS practitioners are engaged in, from core approaches like gender responsive practice to key areas like domestic and family violence, working with young people and better understanding mental health in settlement. Today's launch event officially kicks off the SETS Community of Practice e-learning courses, which we're really excited about. A few have been live for a couple of weeks and a few people have already completed courses and got their certificates in e-learning, which is fantastic. But today's event is where we start to disseminate it more widely, the courses that are up and then the couple of courses that are coming online in the next couple of weeks, which we're really excited about. We've got an exciting lineup of panel presenters today that'll give a quick overview of where we're going on today's launch. We're hoping to keep it fun and interactive and have a couple of surveys as well. So we'll be starting off with Monica Rivas, my colleague and the manager of training at Social Policy Group, who will kick us off with an overview of the SETS e-learning and talking about the workforce competency standards, as well as a couple of the courses, including employment and leadership. We've also lucky enough to have some of the course content creators here joining us today. So Libby Matheson from inTouch, the Multicultural Centre Against Family Violence, speaking to the domestic and family violence training. We've also got Rana Ibrahimli from MYAN, the National Peak Body for Youth Settlement, who will be speaking to the Youth Settlement e-learning course, and also David Keegan, the CEO of Hosts International, who will dive into the mental health course, which is projected to come out in the coming couple of months. And finally, we've also got another one of my colleagues, Varsha Patil from the Social Policy Group digital team, who'll talk about who's actually been integral to helping these courses go live and their creation and finalization. And Varsha will be talking about e-learning in a broader sense, including for professional development and also accessibility. We'd love for everyone who's currently in the e-learning launch to get involved, to participate during the launch. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box or the chat box. We have a Q&A slot at the end of the launch event where we can work through any questions that you might have around e-learning settlement more generally. And between speakers, we've got a couple of quizzes where we can spend a couple of minutes on interactive surveys and polls. So please do share your perspectives. There's no wrong answers, obviously. It's just a great chance to hear what people have to say. In fact, I might actually get us started on a quiz just to keep it open. Yeah, I do see the chat is currently disabled, Marie, but you can drop it in the Q&A, your hellos and questions. So, and then we'll answer it there. I'll just launch the quiz. With my luck on technology today, no, I won't jinx it. So I've just launched a quiz. I'm not sure if my fellow panel presenters can see it, but just for your benefit, or Monica, can you see the quiz? Attendees only, perhaps, just for the benefit of the panel members, just as people have a chance to fill out the e-learning quizzes. We're asking 3 questions. So have you done an e-learning course before? What e-learning platforms have you used? And was your course related to settlement? So I see some of the answers are starting to roll in from our attendees. I'll give everyone another minute more. See, almost all the attendees have filled out the e-learning. I think the results get made public to everyone at the end of the poll, as in the statistics, the macro results. So just at the moment, I can see out of the almost everyone of the 20 attendees has answered. And so a split down the middle on who's done an e-learning course. So 50% actually have done it and 50% have not done an e-learning course before. So it's really interesting for us to hear. In terms of the people who have done a course before, what e-learning platforms have you used? Coursera, a few people have used. LinkedIn Learning, a different platform. 9 people have used a different platform that hasn't been listed there in terms of Coursera, edX, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, and Kaya. And 1 person has done the SETSCoP course using the MYAN learning platform, which is exciting to hear. And finally, was your course related to settlement? No, being 15 out of the 18 answers. I'll end the poll now, having given everyone a chance, and the results I can have a chance to share the results for everyone. And I think that last answer, that the course not being related to settlement, and then a couple of people saying partially, obviously there's a lot of e-learning courses that might help us in our settlement work, that might be loosely related in terms of project management or finance. But what we see and what we think is quite exciting is the chance for settlement-specific e-learning and professional development as well. Thanks everyone for filling in that first interactive quiz. We'll have a chance later in the session to do another quiz. So now perhaps we can launch in earnest into things. Pardon the pun on launch, or the dad joke. I'm a recent dad from a few months ago, so I'm working on my dad jokes. But I'll introduce Monica Rivas, the first presenter. Monica is my colleague, the wonderfully talented manager of training at Social Policy Group, and a leading force in the SETSCoP e-learning. Monica brings a decade of experience in community education, in training and development to this area. And Monica, I'm really happy to hand over to you to get started.
Thanks, Nick. That's a lovely introduction. So I think just before I get into the different e-learning modules, I think it's just really important to give you a bit of background on the National Workforce Competencies. So that's what you can see on the slide there. As this is the foundation for which all the e-learning courses are based on. So if you haven't heard of the National Workforce Competencies, this was developed back in 2021. It was done and developed in consultation with the SETSCoP. Some of you may have been a part of it. The broader settlement sector, a few settlement peak bodies, and the Department of Home Affairs. You can actually find the National Workforce Competencies and more information about it on the SETSCoP website, which we'll kind of show you at the end as well. But it is all there under the workforce, competencies. So just a bit of background around the purpose of the National Workforce Competencies. Firstly, it's to support and inform the ongoing learning and development of the settlement workforce. It's there to guide education, training, and professional development of settlement practitioners. It's to provide a benchmark so that we can make sure that, what we are delivering is consistent across the sector and that it aligns with skill sets and competencies to specific roles. It's also about facilitating continuous improvement and striving for excellence, I guess, across the settlement workforce. And lastly, it's to support the alignment of the workforce to the settlement outcomes. Now, there's 7 guiding principles for the competencies, and these are the 7 that you can see on your screen. So we've got person-centered, agency-centered, strength-based, evidence-based, intersectionality-based, culturally responsive, and trauma-informed. The next slide just shows a bit of an overview, I guess, of the workforce competencies, just to kind of, it's a bit small, but you can kind of get a sense of how the competencies look like and work. So as you can see from the bottom there in the dark blue, that's where the principles of settlement practice sit. And they are the foundation, like I said previously. And these guide the domains and competencies. So there's actually 22 competencies. And these 22 competencies are grouped into 7 different domains. So that's the kind of aqua-colored part of the diagram there. And I'll kind of touch on a few today as well. And then at the top, you've got the scope of practice. So that's just looking at which levels of staff need to be, what that it relates to, which of the domains relate to who. So, pardon me, the domains and competencies, this is really small, but we're not going to go through it because of time. But I guess what I wanted to highlight was domain number 2 from the competencies, because I guess the e-learning modules that we're going to be talking about today kind of fit into that specialist settlement practice. So you'll be hearing from Libby and Rana as well. So in order to, I guess, operationalize the workforce competencies, we developed this series of e-learning modules. And today, I guess, like I said, we have some of the organizations that were kind of critical to developing this training. So currently there's 4 courses that are available through the SETSCoP website, which are the 4 right at the top there of your screen. So we've got employment support in settlement practice, gender responsive practice in settlement, settlement support for those experiencing domestic and family violence, and settlement support for youth. And then we've got a few that are in development or are right at the kind of last part for them to be launched very, very soon. So we've got leadership, understanding mental health in settlement, which David's going to speak on today, and professional practice and the foundational course as well. So as we've mentioned, these courses are available through the SETSCoP website. And as you can see there, they're under the workforce competencies. So if you go to setscop.org.au under workforce competencies, you click in there, and then under that, you can see training, and there's direct links to that as well. And I'm sure Nick is going to also update you whenever new ones are launched through the SETSCoP newsletter as well. Okay, so I wanted to just touch on a few of the courses. Now, unfortunately, Derek Lundberg, who was the one that actually developed these courses, isn't able to be with us today. So I'll just take you through a couple of the courses that he helped to develop. The first one being the leadership course. And just, I guess, so you can get an understanding of how they align to the domains and the competencies in particular, and then kind of what you can expect from these courses as well. So the first one is leadership in settlement, and it's aligned to domain 7, competencies 20, 21, and 22. And I'll show you in a second how that looks like. And the course has been designed for staff of all levels working in the settlement sector. And I guess the framing around leadership is that it's an approach, that it's a behavior and practice rather than a title or role. and that it can be demonstrated by all people working within settlement. The purpose of the course is really to provide just some background as to the work of leaders and to introduce the vision, alignment, execution model of leadership. And it's kind of expected that after completing all the leadership modules, you would actually be able to start crafting your own personalized leadership development program as well. So there's 4 modules within that course. The work of leaders, crafting a vision, building alignment, and championing execution. And yeah, just the next slide, Nick, you can see kind of where it fits within the domains and competencies there as domain 7, leadership. And then the other course is the employment course. And this one is aligned to domain 2. And it's actually part of the specialist settlement practice. So these are, I guess, the ones that you will be hearing about today as well. And the purpose of the course is to support settlement practitioners to build the capacity to help clients find and keep work, with a specific focus on building skills that promote a greater understanding of employers and their priorities. Now, there are 5 modules within that course, and it's probably the one that's been out for a little bit longer than all the others. So you may have actually completed this one. But the 5 modules include just an introduction to best practice, how to engage with employers, developing a pool of job-ready clients, introduction to business startups, and the final module is workplace integration. So again, just the next slide, Nick, it's just for you to see where it kind of fits in within the domains and competencies. And that's it.
Thanks, Monica. And also thanks for helping explain Derek's 2 contributions in terms of course content design and development, and also the broader overview. Really exciting. So perhaps we can get into some of our guest panel speakers, the ones also who have been the driving forces behind the content and the experts in helping develop these e-learning courses and providing their specializations and expertise and knowledge. So perhaps we can start with Libby Matheson from inTouch, Multicultural Centre Against Family Violence. I'll just introduce you very quickly, Libby, but inTouch have been a really great partner in terms of the domestic and family violence area of work in SETS. They've helped co-facilitate the domestic and family violence subgroup meetings at the state level across all the different states through 2021 and 2022, and also helped develop a couple of needs analysis on domestic and family violence within SETS. And as a response to that, developed some resources and tools which have been shared across the community of practice and have received some really great feedback in terms of decision-making trees and referral processes as well. So a really great partner on the domestic and family violence side of things for SETS. And so Libby, I'll hand it over to you to speak to the domestic and family violence e-learning course.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Monica, for that comprehensive contextualisation of where everything sits. I think it's really important to understand where those workforce competencies come into where the e-learning is going. I'm just going to begin with an acknowledgement. We acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of the nation and the traditional custodians of the land in which we work and live. We pay our respects to the elders past and present. We also acknowledge the countless women who've experienced family violence, in particular women from migrant and refugee communities. We recognise the courageous path they've travelled to rebuild their lives, and their experiences continue to inspire and drive our work. So I must say, before I begin, the caveat to today's launch is that the person who developed the content over the last 18 months of our work with the Social Policy Group and SETSCoP, Divya Sivaraja, is actually on leave in India at the moment, so she's not able to launch her own work today. I'm a manager of sector and community. We have a small team of 7 project officers and capacity builders, and working across 17 different projects at the moment. So we are fairly busy. And this is one of the really enjoyable projects because we encounter with the work that we do regular calls for help and support from settlement agencies. So I guess, you know, Nick put down some things to talk about today. I haven't put a PowerPoint together because I think the e-learning speaks for itself. But there's 4 modules within the e-learning that Divya has constructed, and it's come from an intersectional feminist perspective, but it's been tailored to working within a settlement context. A lot of the work we do is tailored to work into particular areas where the intersection with family violence, domestic and family violence, family law, migration is at the core of the issues that are presenting. That first module is very much about looking at the terminology and the learning outcomes for the project, for the e-learning, and also understanding the legislative process and basis for the work. Understanding that across Australia there is no uniform definition of what family violence, domestic and family violence is in each state. And so the e-learning that's been developed has had to reflect those realities, that each state has a decision-making tree, a set of resources and expectations that guide the way practitioners and settlement practitioners working within those states are either supported or left searching for support. So we're hoping that between the e-learning that was put together and some of the tools that were developed after the consultations with SETSCoP's members, that people are able to access that information within their state context much more easily. The modules then sort of move over into looking at what domestic and family violence is in a settlement context, how to identify family and domestic violence, and how to support people in those situations, and then referrals and next steps. It's women and families, people experiencing family violence across the board that face a whole lot of challenges, but we understand that in the migration and settlement context, there are additional challenges and barriers that are presented to people. And as practitioners working across a broad spectrum of services, we have an obligation to be able to respond appropriately, to provide that culturally safe response, but also to understand within our own work environments what the limitations are of our role, but where to go within our organisation to get the support we need. So the e-learning is about helping people know what family and domestic violence is, being able to understand some of the risk indicators and identifying family violence, being able to respond, understand why people may say no to accessing help, that they may not want to give consent to support in the family violence area, and looking at negotiating different pathways with people experiencing family violence. Now, we know that in the settlement context, it's regular contact is held for a long period of time with women and with families and with men. And over periods of time, the settlement workers in particular become trusted confidants. So often settlement workers are placed in the position where they're observing family violence and perhaps don't know how to respond, or they're accepting disclosures of family violence because they've become a trusted confidant. So being able to support those settlement workers is really important. It's a very similar situation we often find maternal and child health nurses in different states find themselves in, where they've become or English language teachers or play group facilitators, spaces where women and men feel comfortable to talk about things more openly. So ensuring that those staff have the right information that's relevant to their state to support themselves and their organisation and their clients at the same time is really important. The e-learning goes through a series of case studies to help people make decisions about which way to go, and to looking at case studies that are particular to the settlement context so that people can recognise those, and then moves into looking at referring to different agencies and the referral processes that are available in mandatory in Victoria's case, but the different options that are available in other states, as well as safety planning. So working with women to support them, sometimes in that, sorry, my time has just gone off, so I don't speak over 5 minutes. Sorry about that. So that very important role that we find settlement workers work with the case managers in our own organisation is in that co-case management role, where each agency is working to their strengths to support the client in a way that helps them transition through the system and continues that support going when the kind of crisis family violence work has moved to the side. So hopefully the e-learning provides participants who are here today with an opportunity to look at a pathway through working with clients when you suspect there may be family violence or when you know that family violence has been disclosed, and you'll be more confident about working through there. There's also a range of references at the end that you can go to get further information, including e-learning that is quite relevant to settlement services available in other areas as well, state by state, and resources. Hopefully that's enough. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks a lot, Libby, for the excellent overview of the DFV course. We've actually had a few people already complete the domestic and family violence course and receive their certificates in that, and a couple of them as well have already given really nice feedback in terms of the resources that are available from the DFV course that Divya helped put together as well, and said that they appreciated being able to download it and use it in their work. So that's been a nice point of feedback as well.
Yeah, it's I think it's the in an ideal world, that's exactly what happens, isn't it? Someone does e-learning, but then there's a practical application of that and being able to pick up those resources somewhere else. And interesting, those resources such as the decision-making tree and other, trying to remember the titles of them at the moment, the decision-making tree, the Directory of Family Violence Services, and the guidance around risk assessment and safety planning, I think. They passed those on to the Ukrainian Federation recently to assist them with work in other states as well, so that they can do a bit of reading and skilling locally with their staff as well. So they're going a long way. It's good.
Fantastic. And then perhaps quickly as well, just to perhaps signpost a little bit what Varsha will be speaking about, but the role of e-learning often being complementary to other types of training that we know that inTouch have already been providing training for New South Wales SETS providers and Queensland SETS providers, and also have Western Australia and South Australia, plus one more potentially online for regional providers and providers more generally around Australia, in terms of an in-person training, and that they can supplement and feed off each other as well, and that there's the accessibility as well. And that also might be a bit of a precursor for Rana at MYAN, that the youth settlement course does also tie into the National Youth Settlement Framework trainings that MYAN run around the country as well. So I think that's also nice to point out here. And with that, perhaps I will introduce Rana, if I just can bring up the section. So Rana, working for Multicultural Youth Advocacy Network Australia, and also like inTouch for Domestic and Family Violence, very kindly helping co-facilitate and lend their expertise to the youth subgroup at the SETS community of practice level, and having worked closely with Anna and myself this past year, and looking forward to this next year in terms of the youth subgroup, and also being one of the peak bodies for settlement for youth and settlement issues across Australia. So Rana, perhaps I can leave it to you to speak about the youth settlement e-learning course.
Thank you so much, Nick. Hello, everyone. And I want also to start with acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm meeting you from. Today, I'm meeting you from the Darug people's land, and I'm actually in a conference, LGBTIQ conference. But I'm really excited that we worked on this e-learning through last year, and we joined forces to deliver it to you today in this launch. So just as a part of the introduction, as you mentioned, Nick, MYAN is the national peak body and Australia's only national voice on rights and interests of young people from migrant and refugee backgrounds. We may know that 1 in 4 Australian young people are from refugee and migrant backgrounds. So we want all of these young people to access the support and opportunities they need to actively participate in Australian society, because this group of young people have enormous potential to contribute to Australian society, and their engagement will be significantly and long-term beneficial for each one of them, and also for their families and their communities and the diverse and multicultural Australia. However, these young people from refugee and migrant backgrounds often face particular challenges in accessing the support and opportunities they need to navigate the demands of settling in a new country. So together with the Social Policy Group and the SETSCoP Youth Group, we developed the e-learning on specific needs, and we try to introduce all the things that I mentioned and the expertise in the needs in the settlement of young people, to add that intersectional lens to what we do in the settlement service. MYAN in 2016 developed a national youth settlement framework, the NYSF, which is recognized worldwide, and it is to support a targeted and consistent approach to addressing the needs of young people in settlement context. This is Australia's first national framework to guide youth settlement policy and service delivery. And through these, I'm really happy that I've seen that it's landing in MYO's learning, and I was navigating it as well. So through this settlement workforce, will study the specific experiences of young refugees and new arrivals to the country. We also shared information about the particular settlement needs that I mentioned, and every year we provide data snapshots about the new arrivals. I use it a lot myself, and without it would be really useful for the workforce to have a module on the snapshot of the data, because it's something that we always talk about, that we need data as a basis of our work. And I guess we shared the snapshot of 2020 and 2021 financial year, but you can also see the rest of the snapshots on our website, and these are designed to help you to plan and to implement based on the baseline, and also to monitor and evaluate and showcase your achievements through a year. One of the most important conversations we always have about NYSF is that some people are looking at it as a complicated tool, while it's basically a framework, and we recognize that as well. And I guess it was really great that we had an opportunity to reintroduce NYSF through these modules. And we understand that in-person training helps people to get a practical way to use tools and have the questions that they cannot get on an e-learning. But I even ask all of my team, and I guess the CMY and partners teams to go through this training, because when I was reading it, I realized it's a great introduction to youth settlement, and it's a need right now. We understand that NYSF and youth settlement in general is going to be a live document, and we need to adjust and adopt it based on the status quo, but that's why we are working on it. And we did a revised package on 2022, and we are still looking at to have that aspect of intersectionality with the LGBTI community, young people, and people with disability in that framework. But I guess the most important part of this e-learning course is the understanding of the reason behind the conversation about intersectionality of young people in settlement and their specific needs. And I really hope that you will enjoy going through it as much as I did. And hopefully it will help you to get a little bit around the complications of NYSF that I acknowledge. Actually, it is complicated, but it's not something that we cannot go through. And a lot of workforce and people who are working in settlement are doing a lot of things organically, and they're great in what they do.
Thanks so much, Rana, for the overview of the youth e-learning course. One part when I went through it that I really appreciated was the examples of the specific issues that young people face compared to the rest of the population in terms of migration and settlement, and the different issues that only young people might face and encounter that were really eye-opening. So highly encourage people to do both the DFE and youth courses that are already live and up. I'll keep going straight on and introduce David Keegan, the CEO of Host International. David's also helped the SETS community of practice in terms of work, and also the Centre of Settlement Innovation, progressing the self-efficacy work from last year. And David and his team are working at the moment on the mental health in settlement e-learning course, which we're excited to get out to everyone over the coming couple of months. David, I'll hand over to you to speak to it.
Thank you, Nick, and hi everyone. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Darug Lands in Sydney, and acknowledge traditional owners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Nick. And yes, this module is still under development, but I'm going to tell you a bit about how it's coming together. A bit about why I'm doing this module is before I got involved in the settlement sector, I worked as a social worker and had a lot to do with mental health and youth mental health, and have carried that interest into the settlement sector and have been quite interested in the role that settlement workers play in supporting mental wellbeing overall, and complementing formal treatment services. And so this course has been very much developed with that in mind. I also think many of you may have heard that refugees are, depending on the source, at least 2 times likely to experience mental illness through their resettlement journey. And a lot of that's due to exposure to trauma, and as well as significant stress factors during the settlement process or the displacement process generally. And so I think it's really important for settlement workers to be able to have the skills to be able to recognise mental illness, to be able to support newcomers to access treatment services, but to also understand what those treatment services are and how, as a settlement worker, you can support the normalisation of mental wellbeing through the settlement process. So this course takes a holistic view to mental illness, recognising that a lot of mental illness is very Western and colonial in its creation, and we try to recognise that there are different views about mental illness, but working in an Australian health context, we also need to understand the medical terminology and the formal treatments that do exist. But I think essentially this course focuses on trying to help workers to understand the core information, primarily to link you to other resources and to be able to find information when you need it. And importantly, to work in a complementary way to formal treatment services. So many of you will be aware that there are obviously torture and trauma services as a primary mental health service, along with other mental health practitioners. And I think sometimes as settlement workers, it can be hard to work out how all those things fit together. And so this course aims to try and do all of that. Essentially, though, it's really just trying to teach baseline skills and point you to other resources. I'll go to the next slide, Nick. I've just got a couple of slides that show the learning competencies. I won't go through each of these in detail, but this is the learning outcomes that come from the resource that Monica was outlining before. You can see that the expectation of this course is that it covers a variety of things, including referral options, how to facilitate wellbeing, how to work within a trauma-informed approach, cultural considerations, of which there are many when it comes to mental illness, but also some of the proactive and practical things that settlement workers can do to support positive mental wellbeing in a holistic sense of wellbeing. The next slide. So just to outline how it's put together, there are 5 modules that at the moment, this is how it's shaping up, but as Nick said, it's still under development, so subject to some minor changes. But essentially, we're putting it together under these 5 modules. So first of all, starting with giving a baseline understanding of the common mental health problems or illnesses in Australia, some of the statistics around that, and just some of the baseline information that you should know when you're working with people who have mental health problems. And we use the term mental health problems there to recognise that mental illness is different from mental health problems, and that there is a continuum of mental wellbeing that we need to consider when we're working with anybody, but particularly looking at the specific things we need to know when we're working with refugee populations. Module 2 focuses heavily on trauma-informed and recovery-oriented practice. As Monica said, trauma-informed is part of the overall principles of the training, but in this particular program, we felt it was important to really understand what those practice approaches mean for a settlement worker. Module 3 deals with cultural considerations. So this is all things considering different cultural interpretations of mental wellbeing, how to get around some of the terminology, being aware of stigma, giving practical, again, suggestions for how to work through those issues and help people to navigate the system. We do have a module focused on assessing and responding to risk of suicide, because that is a particular risk associated with people who have mental health problems. Again, not trying to teach you how to be a practitioner in terms of a technical sense, but recognising that risk of suicide is something that settlement workers do and will face, and trying to give some practical tips there. But again, making recommendations for further courses if you would like more specialist knowledge about that. And then the final one focuses on referral pathways and fostering wellbeing. So obviously how to connect with professional and specialist services, but also what can settlement workers do to promote mental wellbeing generally. I'm a big advocate for focusing on the core factors of wellbeing and promoting wellbeing as a preventative factor for preventing mental illness, but also recognising that people who do experience mental illness will benefit from paying attention to their wellbeing and health. So they're the overall modules. I have tried to incorporate as much links and resources as possible, and videos and interactive material. As Nick said, we're hoping to have this completed within the next few months and live for you to work through, and would love feedback once it's up online. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks so much, David. Really looking forward to it. It seems like it'll be incredibly useful to settlement practitioners, both frontline workers, team leaders, everyone. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of the course. Thanks to all the panel speakers thus far. We've got Varsha from Social Policy Group to talk about e-learning more generally. Before that, Varsha, just while I have this up, perhaps we can do the second quiz, the second and last quiz, and get everyone involved again. Just bear with me as I bring it up. So this one is around e-learning priorities. I'll launch it. And again, the same deal as last time. This thing's flying all over my screen. So a chance for everyone who's attending this e-learning launch to talk about what's most important to you when it comes to priorities. This is a multiple choice one, so you can select multiple answers. So design and layout, content usefulness, downloadable resources, something else entirely. And then another question about perhaps what you've seen thus far, or perhaps what you've seen in terms of e-learning courses previously. What SETSCoP course might you, or perhaps sharing with your team, would you think about doing first? This obviously might be most applicable if you're working in domestic and family violence. That might be something that you are wanting to check out or to share with your team because you see it coming up a lot, or if you're dealing with a lot of youth issues, or if you see that employment is a really high need in a regional community that you might be in, that might be the one that you select. So see the answers rolling in. So I'll leave up the poll for another minute. And just a quick note while the poll's ongoing as well, that I see at least one question on the Q&A, which we can get to after Varsha's talk about e-learning more broadly. So just as you're in the mood while we're doing the poll and quiz, if there are any questions that have come up for you so far at all, or while Varsha's talking as well, please do drop it in the Q&A section, and we'll be able to answer it or try to answer it when the time comes for the Q&A section after Varsha. Almost everyone has completed the poll. Just leave it up for 10 more seconds for the last couple of people who I see a couple more people still answering. So I'll just shut it down in 10 seconds. So sharing the results, not sure if the panel presenters again can see, but just a good chance to go through. So what's most important to you when it comes to e-learning? Content usefulness being the major one that almost everyone has selected. So that's good to know. The downloadable resources being second, and also learning brand new skills and improving existing skills almost coming equal. I think that's an interesting one as well in terms of, are you seeking to learn about a settlement area that you haven't really been in before, or are you currently working on something that you'd like to upskill in? So a nice even split there. And then what SETSCoP course might you or your team take first? So a really nice spread of across the whole gamut. So it looks like people want to take all the courses, which is really nice to see. So fantastic. We'll be sharing, of course, the e-learning courses again in the newsletters and promoting it more widely in your networks as well. So thanks a lot for participating in that interactive quiz. And so for our last speaker, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Varsha Patil from the Social Policy Group Canberra office. Varsha works in the digital team, and as I mentioned at the start, has just been integral in taking the course content and inputting it and bringing it live, and then also really pushing in terms of interactivity, the settings, the functions. We were talking about what an accordion was the other day with Monica and Varsha in terms of a setting and it being the instrument. So with that, Varsha, I'd like to hand over to you to speak about e-learning at a general level.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. And thank you to the SETS team for having me. Just wanted to acknowledge the traditional lands that I'm calling from. They're the lands of Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. It's been fascinating to hear from various course creators the courses that I work on and input, and then make sure the layout's okay and flexible and accessible. But it's been fascinating to hear the backgrounds and the amount of research that goes into creating those courses, and obviously the amount of information and the content usefulness as per the poll. Like, as everyone sort of like responded to the usefulness of the content, what the digital team sort of does is bring about that content into a very interactive sense on the platform, on the MYAN learning platform. So we sort of try and input the content in a way that is not only accessible, but at the same time is interactive to users who might not be used to doing any e-learning course before. So just touching upon the flexibility briefly on e-learning courses, it has been a privilege here at the digital team as well to be able to work on courses that are flexible in terms of anyone across Australia can access anytime. And the second best thing about it is self-assessment, the ability to be able to make the course in your way, like use it whenever you want, and then to be able to like sort of get back to it if you're leading like a very busy life, sort of get back to it whenever you want. But that encourages a better way to learn, and I guess it gives you like a flexibility to be able to suit the course to your needs instead of well, in a sense, like a traditional lesson at a university or something. And given that there is a sense of control in doing those courses, I do believe like it, for example, like the courses that I've done before, they definitely give like a good sense of work-life balance. And in that sense, like I think e-learning courses that we've created so far are accessible in terms of people who would want to sort of do it in their own pace, but at the same time, make sure that it's a lot more about self-assessment rather than having like a very right and wrong answers to different things. And in terms of accessibility, on the e-learning courses, the digital team sort of also works on making sure that we follow the web content accessibility guidelines that goes into inputting the course. So as Nick mentioned, having different features that help out making the content present in a way where it's simplified, but also at the same time, not very jarring and accessible for people with certain disabilities, and gives them the opportunity to be able to access those courses as well. So we would sometimes try to incorporate infographics, design a very complex part of content into a very easy infographic that is not very packed and is able to translate information into simple points that is much better absorbed than it being a full piece of paragraph. And we have employed features like an accordion, which is essentially like a musical instrument. So you would have like a main title and you can like sort of open up the piece to be able to see more content. And it sort of just gives a bit more spacing into your content and gives a bit more flexibility in terms of like coming back to it whenever you want to open it and access the content there, because the content there might be very specific. It might hold very specific sort of resources, like maybe downloadable resources for further reading, maybe resources around videos and more images, and maybe like a PDF on some guidelines. So we try and incorporate that to be able to present the content with certain blocks and spacing. And to the point where the digital team also works with the colors that go on the course. Very, very, like, thanks to Monica and Nick in the past for like helping us out, knowing like what sort of images are culturally responsive to go up there, and which sort of colors would be would help, like in the sense of like someone that might have issues with accessibility on screen. So to be able to know what colors and like what sort of content needs to be structured around those images and the colors in those images. So to that detail, we sort of try and incorporate that we're following guidelines that help out with color contrasting and simple, well, to me, simple things, but for someone else, of course, like huge things like having alternative text on a lot of the images. And in the future, we'd like to obviously explore certain features like audiovisual reading of the e-learning courses to make it even more accessible. And at the point, one exciting thing that we're working on is making our quizzes very accessible, trying to come up with new features such as the drag and drop feature, giving users the opportunity to sort of, I don't know if everyone's done match and I don't know, matching questions back when they were in school, but having users match the answers to what they think is the best answer for that question, giving them the opportunity to basically choose one or more answers, but at the same time have each answer have a reasoning or more like suggestive key points rather than it being an absolute right answer or a wrong answer. So presenting, like giving them the opportunity to self-assess their learning and sort of come up with a better sort of way to regulate your own learning and giving you more control over e-learning courses, because that's essentially what e-learning in this day and age is. It's flexible, and I would love to hear feedback on design and layout once you do a lot of our courses, so we can try and improve the accessibility part of it as well. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks so much, Varsha. We can finish off on the Q&A. That brings us to the end of the speakers and the panel presenters. So thanks so much for everyone for speaking. And Varsha, perhaps that last point on feedback is also a good segue into what we can talk about after the Q&A for 1 minute before we wrap up. But for now, we've got a couple of minutes until the end of the session. I see one question already in the Q&A. Please do write out any questions that you may have. and we'll do our best to provide answers. Otherwise, I'll take it that everyone's been very comprehensive in their presentations on e-learning courses and their course content. For Jane from the Chinese Association in Sydney, is it compulsory for SETS service providers to do the e-learning? It's not compulsory. The e-learning is there for professional development opportunities for all SETS staff. It is tied to the workforce competencies, where the idea was to provide minimum standards for settlement practitioners across SETS to meet, to be able to be in areas. For instance, that might be professional practice and foundational approaches to settlement, which are upcoming, which would be really good touch points saying this is what we should meet in terms of professional practice. But then the specializations, mental health, youth, DFE and employment are more opportunities. I'd say one of those areas of specialization might be more applicable to the others to your staff. So more as opportunities. I'll give it another couple of minutes for people to write out questions and then pass it on just as we wrap up. And so if any questions do come in last minute, happy to answer them, of course, or you can feel free to shoot through any questions regarding e-learning at any time. Just as we do wrap up, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit nasally, I'm a bit sick, but I'm really happy to and excited to join this and being able to help facilitate this e-learning launch. Just to wrap up, what are the aims of the e-learning for SETSCoP? It's to collectively provide professional development opportunities, as we were just talking about for Jane's question, to build knowledge, to provide resources, as we've been discussing, and to sharpen people's skills across the sector for all settlement practitioners across Australia, essentially, to be able to access those learning opportunities. And then, as Varsha said, and also David mentioned as well, there's a feedback option at the end of all e-learning courses that are already out live and also upcoming. And so our aim as the SETS community of practice is to make these e-learning courses better across time, to make them as useful as possible. So if you do get to the end of the course and you'd like to see something more in terms of accessibility, in terms of content, something changed, or you have something to contribute, please do use that. Or of course, you can always contact the Secretariat for anything e-learning or anything community of practice. We'd love to hear from you. And we're really excited as this SETSCoP e-learning suite of courses gets officially launched. As we finish up, I'd just like to thank our panel presenters. Thanks so much, Monica, Rana, Libby, David, and Varsha. It's been wonderful to have you speaking to your courses and to the e-learning more broadly. And also thanks to everyone who has joined for taking part in the interactive quizzes. Really exciting. For the half of people who haven't done the e-learning course, and also for the half who have already done an e-learning course in the past, we'd love for you to share the courses with your teams or to do them yourself. And looking forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks, everyone. I'll finish up this launch event now and have a great day. We'll rest.